You're listening to the Business for Good podcast, the show where you'll hear inspirational stories about companies making money by solving some of the world's most pressing problems. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and I'm glad you've joined us. Hello, friend, and welcome to episode 148 of the Business for Good podcast. This episode is particularly meaningful to me because I've known the guest for some time and very much admire his deep passion for helping animals, both when he was in the nonprofit sector working for animals and now that he's running his own startup trying to help them too. Seafood consumption is going up around the world, including in the United States, with salmon being the fish species Americans love to eat the most. The only seafood Americans eat more is shrimp, who of course are crustaceans, not fish. The biggest wave of alt seafood so far has focused on beef replacement, like burgers and sausages, given how many consumers already view red meat as bad for their health. But the perception that salmon is a healthy food is widespread, meaning that any effort to entice consumers to switch to alt salmon might be swimming upstream in ways that alt beef isn't. Yet, the need for fish-free salmon is as vast as the sea, both for animal welfare and ocean health reasons, but it's far more difficult to replicate salmon's texture than to replicate the texture of ground beef. Enter Oshi, a 3-year-old startup that's raised $14.5 million to date and has invented new machinery to essentially build a fish-free salmon fillet layer by layer. In this episode, Oshi CEO Ophek Ron talks about his journey from being an animal advocate working at a nonprofit vegan advocacy organization to taking the leap to start his own alt-protein company. As you'll hear, at first he really had no idea how he'd remake salmon, yet he still assembled a team of technical co-founders inspired by his desire, and they have raised money based on those skills and not just the idea. Since then, they've invented new technology, released various iterations of their salmon fillet, and now have entered more than a dozen U.S. restaurants. For full disclosure, my own company, The Better Meat Co., works with Oshi, but I can assure you that my admiration for the company predates that partnership, and the decision to bring Ophek on this episode is also independent of it. So, will Oshi help turn the tides for our oceans and their finned inhabitants? Time will tell. But Oshi is certainly riding a wave right now that's taking them from across the Mediterranean to the shores of the United States, and I'll let Ophek tell you that story now. Ophek, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Hey, Paul, how are you, my man?
It is so great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm excited to be talking with you. As you know, I've been following your story for some time, so I'm honored to finally get you onto the show.
So I have to tell you that I'm following you for longer, and I was listening to the show from the first episodes, and I never thought like I thought, but it's like it's still something that I need to learn, to wake up and be very, feel privileged to be in this show now as someone that you're talking with, because I grew on that show. So thank you, brother.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm glad the show has been useful for you. I'd love to hear more about that later. But first, let me just ask about you. You and I have kind of similar backgrounds in that we were animal advocates turned entrepreneurs for animals. But what was it for you that got you interested in animals in the first place?
Yeah, so it was very simple. I saw a video by Gary Yourofsky.
I feel like every Israeli animal advocate can trace their origin to this video. It's really an incredible thing because the video to which you're referring wasn't even recorded in Israel, right? I think it was recorded in Georgia, in the state of Georgia in the US. And some Israelis translated it into Hebrew, and for some reason it took off. It's unclear to me why that is. You have any thoughts? We'll include a link in the show notes at businessforgoodpodcast.com to this particular talk. But for some reason, this went viral in Israel, and I, to this day, don't understand what it was about this particular video that made it so popular in Israel.
I believe we can do a full research on it, but I have no idea why it became so popular, particularly in Israel. But I think that in Israel, there are a lot of things that are enabling veganism to be more mainstream. One of those things is kosher, because in Israel, you already know that you have rules in food. So people are connected to the fact that there is food they can eat and cannot eat as Jewish people. And so this is one. And second is a very ideology country. You have always like a big passion for serving for the country, and a big passion for trying to make a safe life for your families. So like I think those two things, plus the fact that Israel is very viral, people know each other, people talking a lot with other people, very friendly country. It's helped things go very viral very fast.
It's funny because Israel, to my knowledge, has the second highest rate of per capita vegetarianism after India. And Israel also has some of the strongest animal protection laws in the world, including laws against fur and foie gras and so on.
Right.
And I've wondered, like, obviously all of that predates this video to which you're referring. You're essentially describing why Israel might have some greater sympathy for vegetarianism because people are already accustomed to rules about eating, but there's lots of diets with rules. Like, why is it that Israel has become so vegetarian friendly and so animal friendly compared to other countries? Now, if you look at other countries in the region, there are oftentimes, barely any animal welfare laws at all, let alone the leading animal welfare laws in the world. But even compared to other Western democracies, Israel still has some of the strongest animal protection laws. Like, why is it, do you think,
So
that
first of all,
Israel
it's
for
different.
a long time has been so animal friendly?
Kosher is different than diet, because if you don't eat specific food from diet, you don't eat it for yourself. But if you're not eating it because of kosher, you're not eating it because you believe it's not morally right. Okay? Like, you cannot eat meat and milk together because there is a moral issue there. Because the mother's milk with the baby's meat, like there are rules in the Jewish Torah that says you cannot, not because it's not healthy, just because it's not fair. So it's different than other diets. Still, there are other religions that also have restrictions of food, so it's still maybe not the only reason, but I think it's a strong one. And it's a big question. I think it's a very big question, which someone need to need to.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get some other time maybe. But what happened for you? So I interrupted you rudely because you were saying you saw this video. So I presume after you saw the video, you became a vegetarian or you became a vegan, and then like what happened in your life that you thought, oh, this is going to change the trajectory of my life, not just what I personally eat, but what I'm going to devote my career to.
So when I discovered what's happening to animals in the food industry, I decided to go vegan straight away. And not only become vegan, but I was also talking to everyone about why they should go vegan, why they should reduce meat consumption, etc., etc. And it became a mission to me, but I never thought it would be my job. So I still had different ideas of what I'm going to do in my life, but I always thought that this is a very important thing to me. So I will be vegan myself, and I will always try to encourage people to reduce their animal-based products consumption. And never thought it going to be something more than that. And then when I finished my military service, I'm in Israel. Some of you may know, we have to do 3 years of service. And then when I finished that, I found a nonprofit which I was very aligned to the mission of trying in a very positive way to make people to reduce meat consumption. The name was Vegan Friendly. Back then it was another name, but I met the founder and I asked him if I can join and help him start this nonprofit. And I was doing it voluntarily. I was standing in the streets with him and trying to explain to people in the streets of Tel Aviv why they should go vegan. And I did it once a week. Every Friday I would go, take a table, put a sign, talk with people why they should go vegan. And I did it for a couple of years. And during that time, a nonprofit was developed, and my day job was very different. I was doing event production. And through the event production, I was also helping the nonprofit to produce events for people to become vegan. So we did protests for veganism. We did a lot of festivals, and it became like something that was partially a work and mostly volunteering. And later, I asked Omri, the founder, to join the nonprofit. And I joined as a full-time employee after a few years, being there as a board member and helping as a volunteer. And since I stepped into vegan friendly, I knew that's how I want to live my life. I want to live my life 100% committed to the cause that I believe in. Because till then, I was working in the event production. Later, I was running a software business, and it never felt like I'm living myself. I was living a job. And then after that, I would go to vegan friendly and do some volunteering and, have some hobbies. And that's, I think the usual life of the average person, and the average person is fine with that. But I was never satisfied from that. I always wanted to contribute more. I always wanted to be feeling that I'm not working. And since I joined Vegan Friendly as an employee, which was a vice president of business development back then, so I felt that whatever I'm doing ofek. I'm doing my characteristic, I'm doing what I believe, and I never felt like I'm working. So it was like an addiction. I really enjoyed it. And in a few years, we built an international nonprofit together, from a 4-person nonprofit to 60 worldwide, with branches in other nations. And it was hilarious. And the reason I started the company is actually because I was just stuck in Israel because of COVID. And I thought that I didn't know when I would be able to travel again and to go and expand the nonprofit into more nations. And I thought that during that time, the best Israel can bring to the world is the science. And the science in Israel was always very, very strong. And I thought that if I can put my hands on the top brilliant scientists, maybe together with them, we can try to build something new that will have a massive impact. Looking at you, yeah.
Why you, though? So you essentially co-founded Vegan Friendly, and we'll include a link to their website so that folks can go check them out if they want. But you're growing this nonprofit organization. There's a lot of people who might think, well, you're growing the nonprofit from 0 to 60 employees. Why not just continue working there and have that be your living? Why did you think that you were the one who needed to go start a company instead of incentivizing scientists to start their own companies or join other companies? I mean, you already had a relatively successful organization that you were helping to run. So why leave to take the chance of starting a new company?
Because the scale. So what I found out at Vegan Friendly is that it doesn't matter how good you are, you cannot raise more donations in the exponentially, like to grow exponentially. So if we brought $100 from a donor, and we promised him we will do XYZ, and we did 2X, 2Y, 2Z. Then we come to him the next year and we tell him, look, we can do a lot more than what we promised. So instead of giving us 100K, give us 1 million K. Look what we'll be able to do. He's like, sorry guys, you're doing an amazing job. You get 100K again. And the next time we say 4X, 4Y, 4Z. Now just give us 200. We'll do a lot more. Guys, you're doing an amazing job. And because of that, you'll get another 100K. And what I saw at the same time is companies like Beyond and Impossible that are doing the same. They're executing pretty well. Back then it was blowing up, and they're getting billions of dollars. And I say, I want those billions of dollars because I believe with this amount of money, we can do a lot more. And that's the only reason, I thought, maybe I want to go to the tech industry. Maybe I want to find my way, how I can execute well, get rewarded on it in terms of being able to scale the company faster, and then I can do massive impact faster. That's why I went from the nonprofit to the business.
It's so funny you say that, because as somebody who spent the vast majority of my career in the nonprofit world, who now for the last 6.5 years has been running a for-profit company, I have been struck by how different it is, which is, in the nonprofit world, people are donating money with no expectation of any return. Maybe they'll get a tax write-off, but that's it, right? They are giving money, and the return they want is not financial. They want a return, which is social change for animals in our particular case, right? They give you money so you can turn their money into the type of social reforms that they are seeking. In the case of companies, though, and these startups, nobody's just giving you money for the most part. They're investing money that they expect to get a return on at a later date, and they own part of your company. The donor might have some influence on what an organization does, but they can't force them to do anything. Whereas with investors, they actually own part of your company, and they can, in some cases, control what the company does or does not do. It's a very different world, and I think that's illustrative of why it is there's so many more dollars going into the for-profits than in the non-profits, because there's just a lot more people who are willing to give you money if they think they might get a return on it, rather than giving money where they expect to part with it and never see anything again.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, all right, let me get in, Ofek, to your decision then to actually start the company. What were the logistics like for you? You had some entrepreneurial experience prior to doing Oshi, or where the time was plantish. So what was it that helped to prepare you for this? Like, you thought, okay, I'm going to start a company. What was the first thing that you had to do to raise money, to find scientists that you would then go raise money to fund their work? Like, what was step one for you in this process?
Step one was building a team. I did not came with an idea from one university. I did not came with any idea. I didn't have an idea. I just had a desire. Okay? I saw Impossible and Beyond doing great with meat, and I say, I want to do great with fish. Why? As an activist, I know that fish is an area that I'm very passionate about, because there is a lot of wrong things going on in that industry, and I think it's not the best podcast to go into that, but I know I want to do something in the seafood space, and there is not enough products in this category, and not one product that has been tremendously successful. And because of that, I thought that this is a place that I want to give it a try. And I looked which product is the most popular in fish. It was salmon, and I say we should do salmon filet. That's the most popular way of consuming the most popular consumed fish. And that's
It is a pretty
we started with it.
It's a pretty high fruit to grab off of the branch, isn't it? Like, if you think about what Beyond and Impossible are doing, they're not, for the most part, at least at first, were not trying to mimic whole muscle meats, right? They were trying to do something that could be ground like a meatball or a burger. And so rather than doing that, which is much easier to replicate, still hard, but much easier to replicate than a whole muscle product, you didn't think, I want to do fish sticks, which are also a ground product. You thought, I want to do something that is very difficult, which is a salmon filet, which has, the fat layers and the muscle layers that are in there. It's like both visually and texturally very difficult to do. So why pursue that as opposed to something that might be a lower hanging fruit like a fish stick?
It's a great question. I thought to myself that if fish fingers would be a great idea, Nestle and other big companies that are already doing plant-based stuff will go and do it. They have the technology to create fish fingers. They have the technology today to create great burgers. I want to do something which is first more exciting, because most of the people are not eating fish sticks or fish burger. Maybe 1% of the fish consumed as a burger. Above 70% consumed in the natural form, okay, which is the filet. So I wanted to do something that, first of all, will be more exciting, and second, it's something that food companies cannot do. Otherwise, why do it as a startup? Go, offer it to a company, and the company will do it. I will just convince Nestle to do fish fingers, and it will be more successful than me trying to do fish fingers, being an activist and not a food scientist. So I really wanted to try to make something that no one else has achieved of doing, and something that will be looking very challenging, so other companies will not take the risk. And I know that if we will not take the risk, we will not have today fish fillets from plants. And that's
Right.
what motivated me.
We're going to get into your fish fillets, which are truly phenomenal. They taste fantastic, and I'm so glad they're entering the U.S. I know you're in more than a dozen U.S. restaurants now, and hopefully more soon. But let's get into the technology that you actually developed, because most of the time when folks are making plant-based meat, they're not trying to get to that whole muscle texture, right? They're doing these ground products, but you had to invent new technology to create this whole muscle fillet. So what is the technology? What is the moat that Oshi actually developed?
Great. So first of all, which is the more important part, I did not know which technology we will have when we started the company. All I knew is that I have three very smart PhDs, okay, Ariel, Ron, and Ila, and they will figure out a way.
How did you get them? Like, you mentioned that you didn't have any money first. So how did you get these PhDs to join a company that had no money and that you had no idea of what you were going to do?
Yeah, so GFI has connected me to Ron and Ariel. A PhD professor from the Hebrew University has connected me to Hila. And through those connections, I met them. And you know what? It was March 8th, 2021. I gave them contracts. I told them from April 1st, you'll be employed. In Israel, you have to pay for April 9 days after the following month. So I knew that till May 9th, I should pay them. It was March 8th, and I had 2 months. 2 months and 1 day to get somewhat money to pay them. So I just, put a deck with those three legends in the deck. And after a month, we got we got some money from angels, and I was able to pay.
That's great. How much was that first angel round that you did?
So it was a safe of about 300K US dollars.
Okay. And for those not familiar, SAFE is an acronym for a simple agreement for future equity, which is basically a way that you can take money without actually giving shares, and they'll get the shares later on when you run an official round. So how much has the company raised since that 300,000 in the beginning?
So since that, we have officially announced that we have raised $14.5 million. And
Okay.
hopefully soon we can announce some more.
Wonderful. Oh, well, that's exciting. Okay, great. All right. So you raise a few $100,000. You're able to pay these three legendary scientists. What's the next thing? You think, okay, there's a lot of different technologies that maybe we could pursue to create this. How are you going to pick which one to do?
Great. So first of all, we closed the $2 million round after this safe agreement. And with that money, we built a lab, and we started to try a lot of things. And to tell you that I did the trials, I didn't. I was just sitting there looking at these smart people doing magic. And just after a couple of months, we really understood what we're trying to do and how we're going to make the fish. And it's changed again after a year. So in the first year, we were creating something which is not relevant to what we're doing today. We almost pushed a button on creating a huge machine, costs a lot of money. And one day before pushing the button, we realized that it might not be as scalable as we want. And we, erased everything completely and started from scratch. But basically what we discovered is that the way to build fish is doing it layer by layer. So not trying to create everything at once, but to look at a fish like you're building a Lego. Okay, because in the end, what you have in the fish is flakes. The flakes are layers which have a very special shape. Some of them are curved like an S or U or W. And all those flakes are sitting one on top of the other. And in the end, you get something incredible, which is the fish fillet. So what we try to do is to create a machine that the input of the machine would be the flakes, and the output of the machine will be the fish fillet. So basically what we build is, it's called modular layering technology, but basically imagine someone building a Lego. That's the machine. It's a Lego builder. We create flakes, and we put the flakes into the machine, and the machine builds it to be a fish fillet, like a child building a Lego of a salmon.
And so this is essentially 3D printing. Is that accurate or no?
So it's not 3D printing. It's
Okay.
the mother technology of 3D printing called additive manufacturing, which is also the mother technology of modular layering, but it's not 3D printing. We started a company thinking we're going to be a 3D printing company. And after a year or so, we did a pivot and understood that instead of creating the fish voxel by voxel, create it layer by layer.
So would you say that Oshi is a food science company, is a machine making company? Are you like a machinery company? Like what is the nature of your invention?
So we are a food company. We create food.
Okay.
Some of the companies that are creating their food, most of the companies are only creating the food and they use some existing machines to create the food. And we, unfortunately, did not have the machines to create fish fillets, so we needed to invent it. But in the end, we're selling food, and that's it.
Great. So, okay, you're a food company. You're also inventing machines to make this food, and you're now selling it in at least a dozen restaurants in the United States. And what is the cost competitive nature here? So I was actually looking at salmon prices in advance of our conversation here, and I saw king salmon is very costly. It's like more than $25 a pound. Atlantic salmon is basically $10 to $15 a pound. Sockeye salmon, $9 a pound, and wild caught salmon is even costlier, maybe like 300% more than these prices. So I presume you're able to compete on cost with some of these types of salmon, but maybe not all. Is that accurate or is that inaccurate?
Yeah, so today we're selling at a bit above $20 a pound, and we are competitive to the fancy salmons and less competitive for the cheapest salmons. But it doesn't really matter what we are today. What's matter is that what we're building, and it's a brand new technology that we believe that we can bring down the prices not in 10 years, but in 2 years to the level that we can be very competitive to any kind of salmon. And I think that's what's exciting because salmon is more expensive than most of the alternative meats we have today. If you're looking for chicken alternatives, they're competing a very cheap product, which is chicken. And even a burger is quite cheap, but a salmon is a lot more premium, and that's what gives us the advantage of creating something which will be indulgent, that we can invest the best of ingredients in it, make sure it's the best quality and still have some margins in the future to compete with the salmon, which is only becoming more and more expensive because you have less less fish available each year in the salmon industry.
Right. Certainly, the number of salmon is not appearing to increase for sure. And so, presumably, those prices will continue to go up in the future. Hopefully, yours will go down. Is that the only reason that is holding you back? So, let's say you could produce an unlimited number of your salmon fillets. Is cost the only thing? Is there a taste difference? Like it looks from photos, it really looks like regular salmon to me, at least. But have you done focus groups where people were trying blind back to back actual salmon versus your salmon and can they tell the difference?
Yeah, so they can tell. They think it's a kind of another fish. So it's very close to salmon, but it's not one to one. It's not that people are thinking they're eating salmon. They're thinking they're eating another fish, which is salmonish. Some think it's
Okay.
white fish, but it's not one to one. And I have to tell you that probably it will never be one to one.
So it's interesting you bring that up and you say salmon-ish, especially because your first name for the company was plant-ish. So this leads to the question that I've been wondering a lot lately, which is, does the product have to be a mimicry in order to succeed? And let me preface this question or your answer by stating the following. If you think about every single time that animals have been displaced in our economy by some new technology, it is never by mimicry, right? The quill pen was not replaced because somebody invented a fake quill, right? A metal fountain pen is not a fake quill. It's something better than a quill. Henry Ford did not invent a mechanical horse that just ran faster than a horse. He invented something that was so superior, people just left horses by the wayside. Similarly, electricity is not necessary, and kerosene oil was not a perfect mimicry for whale oil. It was just better than whale oil and safer and cheaper and cleaner and so on. And so these are just three of many examples, but I can't think of a single time when something has been a mimicry that it succeeded in displacing it. Usually there is just something better that is different and comes along and people switch to it. And so the question is, we in the alternative meat industry and alternative protein industry in general have often thought we need to perfectly mimic meat. And that's what companies like Impossible are trying to do. But is that the case? Is humanity willing to switch to other foods if they are beneficial in some other criterion, whether it's cost, taste, health, something else that makes people want to buy it, even if they can tell the difference? What do you think?
Okay, so that's a big and important point. And if we should summarize this podcast, let's just put those few minutes for people to hear. When I started a company, I would tell you, yes, if you bring someone something that looks just like meat, tastes just like meat, same price as meat, one is real meat, the other one is pea, fungi, and olive oil. People will take the pea, fungi, and olive oil kind of meat. If it tastes the same price, same nutritions even. Today I would tell you, no, people would take meat. Even if they have all the benefits on the other side, they would take meat. And you know why? Because that's what they want. They want to eat meat, they will eat meat. For them, they don't understand what they're eating when they're eating pea and fungi and olive oil. Okay, and I'm not talking about meat eaters, not about the flexitarians, vegetarians, vegans, the 15% of the citizens of America that are putting meat alternatives in their home once a week or a month. Okay, I'm not talking about them. 15% will be interested in what I just said, and those are the ones that are buying today Oshi salmon, and they're super happy with Oshi salmon. I believe that Oshi salmon could be as great in numbers as Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, and other great players. I believe we can be that big. But if you want to go to the 100% of the meat consumption eaters, of the meat eaters, we cannot just try to mimic. And look at tofu. Tofu is going up every year. More and more people are eating tofu. Oat milk. Every year, more and more people are drinking oat milk. And you know why? Because it's simple. You eat tofu, you know what it's made of. You know that the flavor that you feel in your mouth coming from soy, and you're expecting this flavor, this texture, and you're happy. Same with oat milk. You are coming to oat milk knowing that you will feel and have the taste of an oat. And when you drink it, you're happy, because it's not about clean label, it's not about healthy, it's about expectations. You're expecting the flavor of oat, you're expecting the flavor of tofu/soy, you're getting this. When you're eating meat, even if you're expecting it to be in the taste of meat, and the taste is actual like meat, when you look at the at the package and you see soy or pea, you say, what the hell? What's going on here? What am I eating? How this taste of meat comes to my tongue? What happened here? The expectation is not meeting what you're looking for. Okay, if I would say it's a mushroom burger and it will taste like a mushroom, that will be good expectation. But we're saying just like meat, just like fish, and I'm telling you that we're stuck in this 15%. We're not getting higher on that. And I think that the next product that we and others should bring to the table are not mimicking a species. I'm not going to do after that, the plant-based tuna. No, we're going to make something like the blue algae fish. So you will have the algae flavor, you have the blue color, and you'll understand that you're eating algae. And that's the flavor you will be expecting, and that's what you'll be getting, and it will be nutritious and cheap. And I think that will be a winner for the mass population. Until we'll be... Yeah, sorry.
I certainly hope you're right. And I have thought about this a lot because tofu is growing in sales compared to plant-based meat, which at least in the United States is contracting in sales right now. But it doesn't change the fact that tofu has been on the market for decades in the US. And plant-based meat, of course, has been on the market for decades, but it was only around less than a decade ago that Beyond and Impossible really took off. And very rapidly, those companies built a market that was billions, right? Whereas tofu was still hundreds of millions, despite that. Now, of course, these companies had dramatically larger investments than any tofu company ever did. So maybe if somebody had pumped hundreds of millions of dollars of money into a tofu startup, maybe they too would be expanding. But I've wondered about this. Are people happy to eat tofu? And I've actually thought about the following thought experiment. So tofu, which is cheaper than meat today, if it were even cheaper, let's say that it were, 25 cents per pound, right? So by far the cheapest protein source on the planet. How much would that depress meat consumption? And I don't know the answer to it, but I fear that it's not as much as we would hope. I have a feeling like, if, for example, even if you took, let's say, lentils, right? And let's just say you made lentils free, like not even 25, let's say lentils were literally free to the individual consumer, not to food manufacturers, but to consumers. Would meat demand go down at all if lentils were absolutely free at the supermarket? And I wonder, like, would it go down 1%, 5%? I don't know. But I have a feeling that what you said earlier, which is that people really want meat, is a sad, true fact of human nature. And I'm concerned that if we don't get close to that experience, that we may not branch out into the mainstream like you're aspiring to here. What would you say to that devil's advocate argument?
Great. So what I'm trying to say is that tofu is not an exciting food. Still, people are buying it. Why? Because the expectation is met. You're not dying for tofu, okay? In the end, tofu, it's a lot in how you cook the tofu. It's not a food that as is you take out of the fridge and you eat it like it's a cake. Maybe in Japan, not in America, okay? And in the end,
that's a good point.
Okay, it's not something super exciting, but it's growing because it's meeting the expectation, okay? I don't think we should say, okay, we have tofu, let's just do promotions for tofu and we're winning. No, we have to create novel food. We have to create things which are a lot more exciting, which are giving the experience as you're eating meat, not in terms that it has to be similar to meat, but it has to be exciting as meat in a different way, not in the same way, in a different way, okay? So I see some companies going that way, okay? You have in Israel a company called Kinoko, and they have something that looks like tempeh, very, very tasty, a lot more tasty than tempeh. I don't like tempeh. And, and it's healthy, it's cheap, it works, okay? You have now a company called Vow. They're doing cultured meat of quail. Who knows what's the flavor of quail? But if it's tasty and delicious as meat, but it's different than meat, and I'm convinced that I'm going to eat something which is exciting as meat, but it should be in a different flavor because it's not the meat I'm used to eat. And the expectation will be, I will meet the expectation. Great. And that can be greater than tofu, right?
Well, here is my proposal for making tofu more popular. Right now, tofu is often perceived as a female food. I think obviously that's unjustified. I think many men, including myself, love eating tofu. Tofu is a very good food. But for whatever reason, there are many men who have concerns about tofu. So I have thought, why doesn't somebody create a company that is a branded, exciting, flavored tofu that is called
100%,
Brofu?
100%.
And the brand is Brofu. So this is, not your girlfriend's tofu, right? This is tofu for men. And the marketing has got to be, like wrestlers and fighters who are like smashing carton after carton of this tofu. And maybe they even have non-soy ones. There's an unjustified fear about soy. And so now,
Paul, I shouted it for so many young entrepreneurs that asked me, what should I do? I just told them, invent the new tofu. Okay.
Right.
Invent the new tofu. It doesn't have to be looking even like tofu. Just make something which will be very simple, very, very easy to understand, based on an ingredient people know. And it can work. It can work. Just make something more delicious.
Yeah. Have you seen the new fava bean tofu? It is by Big Mountain Foods in Canada, but it's sold throughout the United States. And it's a soy.
I
It's a
didn't, but
soy
we
free.
have in Israel. We have in Israel chickpea tofu, which is not bad.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I've been really enjoying the fava bean tofu. Amazingly, it has a even better nutritional profile than tofu, and tofu's nutritional profile is excellent, but it's even better. It's lower fat, lower calorie, and higher protein. And so, it's like it's really mind-blowing nutritionally how good it is. And I've been eating it multiple times a week, and I'm like evangelizing it. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes for people who want to get the Big Mountain Foods fava bean tofu in there. But so I have now given Ofek my suggestion for a company that I hope somebody will start, which is Brofu. I hope somebody starts Brofu. But what about you? You said that you've been shouting this from the rooftop for years. You started Oshi. Presumably, you're going to be on this journey for quite some time, right? You're saying that you have even more capital that you haven't announced yet that is coming in. So that's fantastic. Congratulations. You're already in a dozen restaurants. Presumably, you're going to be going into even more as time moves on. So you're going to be occupied. But what do you hope that somebody listening might start on his or her own?
So first of all, is just what you said, the new tofu. Okay, it's not it's something that I really think is necessary for people to do things which are more exciting than tofu. And second is something which I found also important, which when you try new proteins, it takes you some time to find them, to get them into your lab and to make the experiments. So let's say I'm now wanting to try to develop a new food. So, you try to call a few companies to ask them, hey, can you give me an ingredient? I'm looking for a potato protein. So you Google potato protein, you find a few companies, you contacting them through the contact us page. After a week, someone is getting back to you if you're lucky. And then after a few days, they're mailing you some proteins, and after a few weeks you get it. But imagine if you just have a website, okay, like an Airbnb of proteins for trials, and you can see everything available in the world, and in one click you can pay each one of those companies to be sending you those proteins just right away. And why it's good for them as well, because they don't want to do all those emails. And they usually don't get money for the samples. They just, charge you the flight. So instead of being just charged on the flight, I would pay a lot to get the proteins tomorrow and not wait now a few weeks. So if someone will be able to solve how to get trials faster from new companies that we don't know yet, but they can get on this platform and we can rank them and get to know new companies that have new great flavors, protein sources, fats, having everything in one platform, I think that would be a great company. It's software. It's every food company needs it, and it can save a lot of time and accelerate food development, especially in alternative protein space.
Very cool. All right. Well, that's a really interesting idea I've never conceived of or heard anybody mention. So I'm grateful to you, Effect, for mentioning that. I hope somebody will create that Airbnb for alternative proteins. The gauntlet has been thrown down by Effect here. So if you start that company, let us know, and you'll get your first order from Oshi coming up very soon. Finally, Ofek, I want to ask you, you've obviously been on quite a journey with Oshi and with your other entrepreneurial endeavors, both in the for-profit and nonprofit worlds. Has there been anything for you that was useful that you would share with others, whether books or anything else that you have found actually helpful for you and that you would encourage others to consume as well?
First of all, I have to say that before I started Oshi, I thought that it's going to be just fun. I thought it's just going to be fun. Really.
Wow.
People told me it's a roller coaster, ups and downs, but I've been through roller coasters in the past. I started a few businesses, and a nonprofit was a founding member. So I thought, okay, they said it, and I already did like a few things, and I always just had fun. No, okay? No. It's fun sometimes, and it's the opposite of fun for, long times. And you have to know that what you're getting into, because in the end, if you don't have the mission very strong, you'll give up. Because for you can be not sleeping for weeks in some periods in your company from being worried and stressed out because of lots of things going on in your company. And I just thought that if I would know it, I would come more prepared. I would not be in expectation that every day is like, going to play basketball or tennis, which I'm going to play after this podcast. No. And I just want to tell people that if you go for it with the knowledge that it's going to be with a lot of suffering, but also you'll feel you're bringing yourself to the, I will say it in English. You're bringing the most out of you. Okay, you're living your life in a way.
Yeah, it reminds me of in Ben Horowitz's book. He's from Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital fund. And in his book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, he talks about the fact that when you start your own company, you will sleep like a baby because you will wake up every 2 hours and cry. And as somebody who has a baby yourself, I know that you are, or who has had a baby and as a young child, I know that you're familiar with that. And that's certainly been my experience of running my own company at the Better Meat Co. for the last 6.5 years, which has been, sure, there are many moments that are quite extraordinary, but the average moments are quite suboptimal. And that I really feel like being a founder is comparable to just beating your head against a wall over and over again while having the conviction that the wall will break before your head does. And if I could just count the number of disappointments that there have been compared to the number of high points, they're not comparable numbers, unfortunately. But if it works, what a great service for the world that you will have committed. Hopefully it'll be financially beneficial for you and your employees and your investors. But I know that people like you, and certainly myself as well, are motivated by how much suffering we can reduce in the world. And that's what keeps me going in this, to think that there is a large universe of suffering that hopefully some of which we can ameliorate through the work that we're doing at our respective companies. And I'm grateful to you, Ophek, for everything that you and your colleagues at Oshi are doing. And I'm rooting for you all to turn the tides, pun intended, on the devastation that we're wreaking in the oceans. And I will very much hope to see the Oshi salmon proliferate throughout restaurants in the United States and abroad.
Amen.
And I will now say good luck in this tennis match. I hope it's a grand slam for you, and we'll look forward to talking with you later. Thanks so much, Ophek.
Thank you so much for the talk.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, please let the world know. Leave the show a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app and share the episode with your friends. Who knows? Maybe you'll inspire one of them to be in the business of doing good themselves.